A new report out of Japan links the Phillies and slugger Munetaka Murakami. But what does this mean about the Phillies' offseason plan, especially at third base? We'll talk about it on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and also now the #1 sports podcast network. And Locked On Phillies is your #1 place for daily, Monday through Friday, Philadelphia Phillies content. Yes, even in the offseason. You might know me from some of my other work in sports talk. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic doing sports talk radio for over 6 years here at Philadelphia. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 4 seasons now, and this is my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. A new report came out of Japan recently linking the Phillies with Munetaka Murakami. Interest appears to be there if reports are to be believed. But what does that mean about the Philadelphia Phillies plan at third base? What does it say about Alec Bohm? What does it say about other potential free agents that could be in play for the Philadelphia Phillies? Maybe at that position, maybe a guy we've talked about a bunch. We're going to start with that. Later on in the episode, we're going to discuss, looking back on Kyle Schwarber and Cristopher Sanchez's big years, who's more likely to repeat that feat in a future season in their career. And we'll wrap up with a look at the latest news of the day, which is that Kyle Schwarber and Ranger Suarez were both extended qualifying offers, and they both turned down qualifying offers. We'll tell you what qualifying offers are, what this means, and what it does for the Phillies' offseason plans. But let's start with a look at this news about slugging third baseman out of Japan, Munetaka Murakami, who has already put in the paperwork to be posted, which means he will be eligible to be signed by major league teams. And a report came out saying that the Phillies are particularly keen on him. He's already been approached by multiple major league teams, but the Phillies have specific interest. We talked about him in a free agent profile breakdown, and I said that, hey, he's popped from the hot corner. He's a left-handed bat, so it would be kind of interesting to see the Phillies add another power-hitting lefty to their lineup. And there are some people who do not believe that he's going to translate well to the Phillies lineup because he's a bit of a strikeout guy. And you would like to see a guy that's at least right-handed and pop with less strikeouts, and that's not really the profile of Munetaka Murakami. But the Phillies have interest. We saw last year that the Philadelphia Phillies had interest in Roki Sasaki, who came out of Japan and ultimately signed with the Dodgers, but the Phillies were interested in him as a guy to sign. They made an offer to him, and I said at the time, last offseason, that shows that the Phillies are ramping up their involvement in the Japanese player posting market. We haven't seen the Phillies get one of these stars come out of Japan yet. Once you do, it opens up the opportunity for you to then explore that market even further so that when the next great Japanese player becomes available, you're in the mix because you already have one of their countrymen on your team. It's simple, right? People want to go where they feel most comfortable. And the Phillies have been looking to break into this market. They just haven't had the success yet. So could that be all that this is? No, because you're not going to sign a player to the contract that Murakami's probably going to get, which won't be like a Shohei Ohtani deal or a Yoshinobu Yamamoto deal, but it will be a lucrative contract and a long-term deal for the 27-year-old. So what is it? There has to be more than just, hey, we're going to pay out the wazoo to bring in this guy just to open up that market for us. There has to be a thought that there's an actual fit there. And here's what, to me, this report is telling me without telling me. It says a lot less about Murakami and a lot more about Alec Bohm. If these rumors are to be believed, that would mean that the Phillies are at least sniffing around other options at third base. And if they felt settled that, hey, Alec Bohm, we like what he did this year. We feel comfortable that that's a spot where we're going to keep him because we have a lot of other moving parts. We got to look at Kyle Schwarber. We got to look at JT Realmuto. We got to figure out the outfield. Why would we create a hole at third base? I've gotten these comments when I bring up potentially trading Alec Bohm. Why create a hole somewhere it doesn't exist and give yourself more on the to-do list when you don't have to? And my argument to that is always, I think we're at the point where the Phillies need change for change's sake. And the fact that they're looking at other third base options means that Alec Bohm is going to be shopped this offseason. I feel pretty confident in saying that. Do I know if he's going to be traded? No. The Phillies went full-on fire sale on Alec Bohm last year, and nobody met the asking price. The market was much softer for Bohm than what the Phillies thought it was going to be. And for that reason, they kept him. And he had a solid year in 2025, but the same issues exist. He's not a power hitter. He's not going to create a lot of those RBI opportunities. I know he had that like around 100 RBI season a couple years ago, but that's not going to be the consistent type of player that Alec Bohm is. And third base is a position where right-handed pop seems to be a necessity for contending teams. So with all of that in mind, I think this is the first little indicator, the first wisp of smoke that we see in the Phillies are going to look to potentially move on from Alec Bohm. Again, I told you, it says more about Bohm than Murakami because there are a lot of interested teams. The same report says multiple teams have already reached out and expressed interest. So the Phillies are going to get in a bidding war, and that is something that is going to be tough to handle with other big-name free agents higher up on the wants list. But this also brings Alex Bregman even more into play. That's where the real smoke, I think, is coming from with this. Because we talked to you about, in a past episode, Jeff Passan putting together his perfect move for every team in the offseason. And for the Phillies, he listed the perfect move as Alex Bregman. We've heard rumors that the Phillies could look at him. He fits a lot of what the Phils are looking to add to this team. He is an older player. It would be a commitment to another long-term contract for a guy on the wrong side of 30. But if you're doing this and taking a look at a Japanese posted player at that same position, and we've got insiders saying the perfect move would be another third baseman, I would be absolutely floored if we do not get another report by the end of the calendar year that says the Phillies have been listening to or reaching out for potential trade packages on Alec Bohm. This is something that will probably catch more steam when we get closer to or past the winter meetings. That's normally a point not only where free agency kicks up, because there are a lot of agents that will be there working on stuff and a lot of teams discussing what their values are for certain players, but it also gets every front office in baseball or representatives from every front office in baseball in the same building. And that is something that is huge for trade talks as well. People get so focused on free agency, you forget that guys can wheel and deal this time. A lot of times the trades are the less expected moves. Like nobody saw the Phillies trading for Jesus Luzardo last offseason. That kind of came out of nowhere. But this wouldn't be a shocking move given the little bits of information that we've been hearing about third base since really the free agency class started to become clear. So could Alec Bohm be on the move? That's the number one direction that this is pointing for me. So let me know if you think that is a good thing or not. I've already told you, I like the idea of creating change, even at places where you don't necessarily have to have it, because the makeup of this team just feels unsteady right now. It feels like, or maybe too steady is the way that I should say it, right? Like they're too set on doing the same thing over and over and over again. And at this point, I'm over it. I don't want to see them run this back again. And if that means you move Alec Bohm and you try something different and you take the risk that maybe you don't get as good of a player, but it's a different player, I think that's a place you could do that. You could do that at second base. You could do that in the outfield. We already have thought that Nick Castellanos could get moved and the Phillies could eat some of that contract. That's kind of been quiet as the offseason has begun, but I'd expect that to heat up. So as much as free agency is a focus this offseason, don't be surprised if there are a couple blockbuster or close to it trades that the Philadelphia Phillies put together for some of their most well-known players to move to bring in different faces. It's a very interesting report. We'll keep you updated on that. And hey, if it is Murakami, more power to the Phillies because it does open up that Japanese market a little bit more for them. I just think this says more about the position than it does the individual player that the report is on. Speaking of individual players, we're going to talk about Kyle Schwarber and Cristopher Sanchez's great year. No complaining about where they finished in MVP voting and Cy Young voting or all MLB teams. Just what a great year they had. But we like to look forward as well. Who's most likely between those two star players to recreate the performance that they had this year? There's arguments on both sides. I'll make my pick as we continue today's episode. Let's talk about FanDuel first, though, because the NBA is rolling right along. Another nice win for your Philadelphia 76ers last night, and you could have won some money on it. There's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Me personally, I think basketball is the best sport to do live betting on. It's a game of runs. Getting a feel for who's hot, you can get the ball to anybody. It's not like baseball where you got to wait for a guy's next at bat. It's not like football where you got to wait for a play called or for your team to be on offense. No. At any given time, and hockey is similar to this as well, but the scoring's so much lower. Guy gets hot, his teammates start feeding him the ball. The next thing you know, he scores 10 points in 4 minutes of game time, and you could cash in with a live bet on FanDuel. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And you don't just have to wait for the game to start. You can bet before the game. Parlays, props, money line, spread, even futures bets if you're looking way off into the future. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Who's more likely to recreate their stellar season from 2025? I just want to take a second. No complaining, no blaming Major League Baseball for not giving the proper amount of respect to Kyle Schwarber and especially Cristopher Sanchez, who, again, I will say, not making all MLB first team is absurd after being Cy Young runner-up in the National League, but I've already made my case as far as that's concerned. They had amazing seasons this past year. Cristopher Sanchez was one of the best left-handed pitchers in all of baseball. He was the second best pitcher in the National League behind a guy who could go down as an all-time great in Paul Skeens and has had one of the best starts to a career in Major League history. Sanchez was right up there with that dude. He has the best off-speed pitch in baseball. His changeup is the greatest change of pace pitch in the current game. I will take that debate against anybody's secondary pitch. And, oh yeah, this season he decided he was just going to wake up and sit 96. This guy was throwing like 92, 93 a couple of years ago. What in the world happened? Big guy, projectable, healthy. This dude is a workhorse on top of it all and a future or current ace of the staff, depending on how you look at it and what Zach Wheeler's future holds. So Cristopher Sanchez's year, outstanding. He is probably the number one reason to be excited about the future for the Philadelphia Phillies because he's got a lot of good years left. He is right in the prime of his career, and he's still on an uptick, right? You look at his past couple of seasons, better. heading in the right direction, where a lot of the Phillies who are aging into their mid-30s are going worse, 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 worse. Sanchez is the rare current Philly that is actually on the upswing in his career. Kyle Schwarber, on the other hand, found new life this year. He has had some great seasons in the past, and he's been awesome in his time in Philadelphia. And we hope that, or at least I hope, maybe you don't, but I think you're crazy if you don't hope this. I hope his time in Philadelphia continues. I hope he's back for more seasons. I don't want to see that guy leave. And part of the reason I don't want to see that guy leave is because he is such a consistently great power hitter in his time with the Phillies. Just going out and you could pencil him in for 40 home runs, and if he bats in the middle of the order, over 100 RBIs pretty much every season. And he plays a very low impact position, a low stress position, I should say, because he can make an impact. That's not the point I'm trying to make. He doesn't have to do that much. All he does is hits. He's a DH, which means longevity for him is different than a lot of these other guys. It's actually pretty comparable to a starter, because starters only throw once every 5 days, and Schwarber just hits. So you're not looking at a guy like JT Realmuto, who every year catching 100-plus games is going to crush how his body feels, and he's going to age faster. These guys can both continue this level of success. I don't think we're at a major fall-off point for either of these players. But which of the two do I believe is most likely to replicate what they did in 2025? I think this is a really easy answer, and it's Cristopher Sanchez. Now, there's an argument for Kyle Schwarber, which I will make in a little bit, but the reason I think Cristopher Sanchez is more likely to replicate this feat is because he's got more time to do so. I'm not just talking about this next year. I'm talking about at any point in his career, because Cristopher Sanchez is already locked down on a long-term deal, and Kyle Schwarber, you're looking to pay a long-term deal. So if these guys were both one more year and out, we'd be talking about 2026. But I'm looking at the future of their time in Philadelphia, assuming that Kyle Schwarber will be back, which is just an assumption we have to have this conversation. And I think it's much more likely that the guy who has the prime of his career still ahead of him goes out and creates things. He's also had the biggest changes in his game. Kyle Schwarber took a big leap this year against left-handed pitchers, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. That is why this season happened, because he became the greatest hitter power-wise against left-handed pitchers we may have ever seen in this game. He set the record for most lefty-on-lefty home runs in a season this year. So there is nobody left-handed that has hit as many home runs off of left-handed pitching as Kyle Schwarber did in 2025. Never happened in baseball. So it's a big jump, but Sanchez has added velocity. He has fine-tuned his pitches. He could add more to his game still to put him over the top when it comes to an ace-level pitcher in baseball. Like, we have seen such growth year after year after year from him, whereas Schwarber is kind of like, okay, he's going to give you 40 homers. He's going to give you 100 RBIs. And then he just kind of had a pop-up year out of nowhere. Not that it was completely unexpected, but we didn't expect it to go to that level. You have one guy that's showing incremental growth and another guy that has been pretty steady and then had one pop-up year. There's a much better chance that Schwarber's 2025 is an anomaly with the level he got to than Cristopher Sanchez's 2025. That might scare people and say, well, why would you re-sign Schwarber long-term? Because, well, he's probably deserving of that money even if he just goes out and hits 40 bombs every year for the next 4 years. The reason you could argue it would be Schwarber, though, is exactly that. There's more sample size there. Could Cristopher Sanchez be a flash in the pan? I don't think so at all. Like, I don't think he's all of a sudden going to turn back into the guy that was back and forth from the bullpen to the starting rotation. Like, he's an ace caliber arm. He's a Cy Young runner-up. That's ridiculous levels of pitching ability. But he's newer into his career than Schwarber, who has been doing this for a long time. And you know what to expect from Schwarber. Sanchez, there still feels a bit of like there's a bit of a mystery box component of how great he can be. Schwarber is Mr. Consistent. You pay him, you know what you're paying for, you know what the return is going to be, you know what the seasons are going to look like. So if you believe that stability is a better sign that he's going to put out a season like this, you could pick Kyle Schwarber. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments as to who you think is more likely to repeat the season that they had this year. But I think it's the guy on the upswing, not the guy that has plateaued where he's at and is also on the backside of his career, it would seem. Who knows, though? The guy that I always think about when it comes to Kyle Schwarber, just to maybe put your mind at ease with what I'm saying about I don't know if he'll ever repeat that season. Nelson Cruz was doing this until he was like 70 years old. Like DHs with smooth swings, and Schwarber has a smooth swing. He's not as violent as a guy like Bryce Harper, which leads to less injuries, which leads to a better chance to extend this into his late 30s. Like, he could be doing this for a long, long time too. So there's no wrong answer there. I just think it's more likely that Sanchez does it again. But there were two great seasons, and whether they got lauded for them or not, they were major, major storylines in baseball this year, and you got both of them on your team. It's a great thing to see. And hopefully both of them can replicate what you saw in 2025 in another season. I'd be lying to you, though, if there wasn't part of me that in saying all this says, did you just get a career year from Schwarber and a career year from Sanchez and you wasted it? Like, is it likely that either of them replicate those years? I don't know. It's a coin flip. And if that was as good as you were going to get from those two guys and they did it in the same season and you go out in the first round that you play in, winning only one playoff game, it's not exactly a great place to be. But coming up next, a great place to be would be offered $22 million in change. I would love that, man. Give me that to do some podcasts. I think we would all take that. And if you're out there and you're like, I don't need $22 million, man, congrats on being the richest listener to Locked On Phillies in the history of the podcast. That was the offer for qualifying offers this year in Major League Baseball. And Kyle Schwarber and Ranger Suarez both said thanks, but no thanks. I'll tell you what qualifying offers really mean and what it means that they both turned down those qualifying offers as far as it pertains to their future or their potential future here in Philadelphia. So what is a qualifying offer? I'll start off by telling you about that. But first, I want you to qualify for our Everydayers Club here on Locked On Phillies. I want you to be a part of the show. We do Mailbag Monday. We do Off the Poll. We love to interact with our listeners. And the way that you keep track of what we're doing every day on Locked On Phillies is hitting that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. We're putting out new videos Monday through Friday, daily. And if you hit that subscribe button, which is free to do and takes you like 1 second, it's super easy. Just click that button if you're watching on YouTube. You'll get notifications when new episodes are posted. It'll be in your algorithm so our content shows up. It does nothing but basically saying, hey, remind me about Locked On Phillies. We're not just on YouTube, though. If you can't watch the show and want to listen, maybe you're driving in the car, got to keep your eyes on the road. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, thank you. And it would be great if you could rate and review Locked On Phillies. Be part of that Everydayers Club. Check out our content day in and day out so you never miss what you need to know about your Philadelphia Phillies. A qualifying offer in Major League Baseball is basically what the franchise tag is in football. If you're familiar with that, you take the average salary of the top 125 highest paid players in baseball. And players that are going to be free agents that have not previously received a qualifying offer in their career are eligible for this. So first-time free agents or guys that maybe were not free or were free agents but didn't have as much cachet. Like Kyle Schwarber, people were somewhat interested in him last time he hit free agency when the Phillies signed him. Got a $100 million deal, but they weren't like beating down the door to sign Kyle Schwarber. I'm like, okay, plus DH, can't really play the field. Universal DH was not a thing at the time that Kyle Schwarber hit free agency, so that wasn't really a component, and there was thoughts that it could come to baseball in the National League, but he has not gotten one yet. And Ranger Suarez is hitting free agency for the first time, so he has not gotten one. So they were both eligible for qualifying offers, and this year it was $22 million and change. But what it is just a one-year deal. Both Ranger and Schwarber are looking for long-term contracts and are deserving of long-term contracts. So they said, nah, we're good on the qualifying offer, and that totally makes sense. I mean, Ranger had a really darn good year. And we just got done talking about Kyle Schwarber being the runner-up to MVP. So unless Schwarber thinks that he's going to go out there and win MVP next year and maybe hit like 60 home runs and have 140 RBIs, which would be a ridiculous projection to make. Like it's not logical to do that. That would lead to him maybe taking a qualifying offer and saying, okay, I'll bet on myself to make even more money next offseason in free agency. But he's already going to get more than $22 million a year on a long-term deal based on what he did this year. And Ranger Suarez is going to get the same because he's got some good years ahead of him. And he's one of the top 2 or 3 left-handed starters available in free agency. So both of these dudes are going to get paid. There was no reason that they would sign a qualifying offer. But the Phillies got to go out and do that, right? Now, JT Realmuto, you could look at him and say, well, why wasn't he given a qualifying offer? And the reason why is because the Phillies are going to look to bring him back at less than $22 million a year. He's a little under that threshold. So you don't want to offer it to a player who is not going to make that much money because you know what they'll say? Great, you're going to pay me more than what I'm worth and cost yourself more money? Where's the dotted line? I'm going to sign. There were players that accepted the qualifying offer around baseball. So we take a look at some of the names, and these are now projected free agents that will not be free agents this year because once you sign it, you're automatically under control. The players who declined were Bo Bichette, Dylan Cease, Edwin Diaz, Zach Gallen, Michael King, Kyle Tucker, Framber Valdez, and of course, Kyle Schwarber and Ranger Suarez. So some of the big name free agents that will indeed be free agents. But there were also a couple of guys that accepted their qualifying offer. Guys like Gleyber Torres, Brandon Woodruff, Trent Grisham. Another name that accepted a qualifying offer was Shota Imanaga, a lefty with the Cubs. That's another left-handed pitcher off the market, which means the Ranger Suarez market has just gone up. When a lefty gets signed, and Imanaga's a really solid lefty for the Chicago Cubs, teams would have been interested in signing him. He's now not available. So more eggs go into the Ranger Suarez or Framber Valdez basket. So all that this basically is those guys saying, we think we're going to get more than $22 million a year on the open market. We think we're going to get a long-term deal. So we're not going to sign it. You know what it is? It's that person who is on Instagram, the guy on Instagram who sees like a supermodel post the picture of her in like Turks and Caicos or something. And you're Jimmy who works in accounting in New Jersey. And you're like, you know what? Let me comment on the picture and say, hey, great picture. You look great. You know that girl's not all of a sudden going to be like, oh, an accountant. Hello. All due respect to accountants. Sorry, I don't need to be mean if you're an accountant out there, but you get what I'm saying. You're taking a long shot. You know they're not going to say yes, but hey, shoot your shot, King, right? That's what the Phillies essentially did. They shot their shot to see if maybe there's a chance they could get these guys on a qualifying offer. It's more of a due diligence type of thing where you have to offer it, you know they won't take it, and then you move on to free agency. So that's all that it is. And now we've got even more names confirmed hitting the free agent market. And these are the big name guys. Again, it's the average of the top 125 players in Major League Baseball salary. So if you're offering this, you're expecting these guys to be top 125 players. And now a bunch of them are hitting free agency. So this is another point in the offseason where you start to have the full picture of who's available, and then the wheels start turning on who teams are going to sign. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the #1 sports podcast network. So I appreciate you helping us get to that point. I appreciate you watching today's episode. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that makes you part of our Everydayers Club and helps you out and helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. And I'll talk to you tomorrow on our next episode.